Hi, and welcome to this video about the right age to teach your child how to read. I have some thoughts about this that I'm really excited to share with you. Please make sure if you haven't subscribed to the channel that you go ahead and hit subscribe so that you'll get notifications whenever a new video is released. So I have 3 thoughts to share with you about what age to start teaching your child how to read. And the first one is that the right age for teaching your child how to read is really going to depend on your child. There's a wide range of normal ages that kids learn how to read. Some kids learn how to read as young as age 3, and that's normal. And some kids don't learn how to read until as late as age 7, and that's also normal. So anytime between the ages of 3 and 7 is really very normal. Even a little bit younger or a little bit older than that can be normal as well. And the truth is that whether your child is going to learn to read at 3 or is going to learn to read at 7 has a lot to do with genetic factors and just other factors that are outside of our control. So just like at some point your child is going to get taller, but you're not sure exactly when that's going to happen, and there's not a lot that you can do to control it, the same is true with reading. At some point your child is going to learn how to read. It might be anywhere in that age range, and there's not a lot that we can do to control when that is going to happen. There are some things that we can do to help influence our kids, to help them to be as prepared as possible, but there is a genetic component to this that is outside of our control as parents. So that means that if your child learns how to read at 3, that does not necessarily mean that you are a superstar, and that if your child doesn't learn how to read until 7, that does not mean that you are a failure as a parent. I want to say that again because it's really important. If your child is one of the ones that learns how to read a little bit later in the spectrum, that does not mean that you have failed them as a parent. And it does not mean that you're not doing everything that you can to make sure that they will become a successful reader. So it's just important to be aware that there's a wide age range and to understand that your child can fall anywhere on that continuum and that that's okay. When you're trying to decide if your child is ready to learn how to read or not, the best way to do that is to look for some specific signs of reading readiness. These can include things like your child knows the names of the alphabet letters, or your child starts to recognize printed text in different places where they might see it. So they might recognize letters in the sign on the front of a store, or they might recognize letters that are written on a t-shirt that somebody is wearing, or they might start to recognize the letters in their name when they see them printed other places. So kids might start to recognize that print. They might start to read books independently to their stuffed animals, like take a book and page through it and tell a story. So they're kind of pretending to read. There are quite a few signs of reading readiness to be aware of, and I made a separate video that explains 5 of them, and I'll put a link to that video in the description of this one so that you can check that out and be aware of those signs and start to look for them in your child. The last thing that I want to say about the right age to teach your child how to read is that if you are in doubt about whether or not it's time, there is nothing wrong with waiting. You can always just wait a few months, really observe your child, spend some time looking for those signs. If you're worried about it, you can spend some time practicing alphabet letters with your child and just wait. It can be really helpful to kids to have that extra waiting period because reading is a difficult skill for many kids at the beginning. And if a child can be just a little bit more mature and have just a little bit more resilience to be able to tackle a difficult task, this can be a really valuable thing for them as they're learning how to read. There are lots of things that we can do to make the process of learning how to read more fun and exciting for kids. But the reality is that, especially if your child isn't quite ready and you're trying to push the process, it can be very easy for your child to get frustrated and discouraged and just to lose any love of reading that they have. And really, the love of reading is more important for kids than their actual ability to read, because the ability to read will come in time. Because the ability to read will come in time, But if your child loses the love of reading that they have, then they won't be motivated to practice or to read on their own. So if it's a choice between a child who learns how to read a few months or even a year or two later, but still loves reading, and a child who learns how to read early, but gets frustrated with the process and loses their love of reading, it would be better to wait a little bit longer and to make sure that your child is still enjoying the process rather than to push it earlier. So hopefully this has been helpful and given you some things to think about in terms of what age to teach your child how to read. Remember that the range of normal ranges anywhere between ages 3 and 7, sometimes even wider than that. Remember to be on the lookout for those signs of readiness. And if there's any doubt in your mind about whether or not your child is ready, then it's probably a good idea to wait a few more months and just to watch for those signs of readiness in them. So please feel free to leave your comments about what age you taught your child to read or what age you learned how to read in the comments, and any strategies that you have as well for knowing what age your child should learn how to read.